Good evening, everybody.
Kavod Harav, how are you?
Baruch Hashem, thank you. Okay, we're going to continue with the Bet Yosef.
I wonder why it's not showing on Facebook.
It may take a little time, but it'll get there.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Good. Right. So he says here, "V'chen yirem ishu data Rambam." Right. Perek Vav. So the Rambam seems to go, like Rabbeinu Tam, the Mordechai also. Katav Kedat Rabbeinu Tam. They also pass like Rabbeinu Tam. So what does that mean? The Bainan Pat v'Tavshil. So according to them, we do require, right, some bread and also cooked dish, as we said, right, for the eruv. Okay, so let's go on from there. So it says that Tosfot katu sheri cholek al Rabbeinu Tam. Right, so says Tosfot that the Re argues with Rabbeinu Tam, right, as we already spoke about this. Komakom אומר לי, לא מלאני ליבי לעבור על דברי דודי. Oh my God. וצריך פת ותבשיל. Oh, wow. Look what the Re says, right? This is a nice loaded sentence over here. So he says, I don't have the gall, he says, to argue with my uncle. Right? So what do we see from there? That he was the nephew of Rabbeinu Tam, right? The Re. Good to know. As I'd say, it's all in the family, right? So what does that mean? Rashi, as we said, right? He was the grandfather of Rabbeinu Tam, and and the Re was Rabbeinu Tam's nephew. Okay, that's a nice family. What can I tell you? Good family. All right, so there you go. So he's telling you, right, that even though I don't agree with him, but practically speaking, I don't have the gall, right, to do differently than him, right? Okay, well, there you go. So therefore, he says you need bread and a cooked dish. The hen amad davar. It says that's how the people do also, So in other words, it's a custom also as well. And by the way, until this day, this is a custom, that we do one cooked dish, as we said, right, and one piece of bread. But if I'm not mistaken, it does say, right, in the halakha that bediavad, if he doesn't have, let's say, right, both, so he can just rely on the cooked dish. That would be enough, So in other words, bediavad, we're going to pass like the Re, as a safety net. Okay. So let's go on a little bit. וכן עמד דבר, it says, okay, והרב המגיד כתב פרק ו', so says רב מגיד, דע שהתבשיל אחד ולא פת סגי. Oh, so he just exactly what, right? Speak of the devil, right? That's what he's saying. What does he say over here, right? That he says it's really, the cooked dish is enough, right? You don't really need the bread. As we said, right? בדיעבד. וכן נראה מלאכות. So he says, so הלכה seems to say that. Who's the halachot? This is the riff. לכן כתבו מקצת הגאונים, right? Also the גאונים, he says some of them wrote like that. So you see, right, that there's also the other side of the equation over here. וזה דעת הרמב"ן, also the Ramban, Rashba. So we see, right, there's several big rabbis who hold like that. What does that mean? They hold the same as the Ri, right? That you don't really need it. You don't need both. Okay, good. So it goes on. But he says, right, again, the custom is to do both, right? So lechatchila, try to have both, right? B'diavad, you can rely on the lenient opinion, right? So what does that mean? Just a cooked dish, right? One egg or something, whatever. You're good to go. Okay, good. Let's go on. So כתב הגות מימון, right? It says in הגות, שרי ורבו של רש"י היו נוהגים לערבב הפת תבשיל. Oh, interesting, right? So he says the custom of the Ri and Rashi was that what? That they would like put, like the bread and the cooked dish together. So what does that mean? It seems like they made like a sandwich or something, you know? Tavshil, v'chen pashat minhag. That's the custom, he says, right? So some people like to make a sandwich. Very nice. Okay, well, this we don't see this in Shulchan Aruch, but it's out there. But he says, as we said, right, if they just use the cooked dish, right, so he said, right, says Bet Yosef, that we rely on right, all these rabbis who allow that, so therefore, whatever, right, it's all good. Very good. So we're finished with the Bet Yosef there. This was which one? This was Bet. Okay, so we're going to do Shulchan Aruch Bet. So it says Shulchan Aruch like this. Eruv zeh osin oto bepat v'tavshil, right? As we said, we make it with bread and with a cooked dish. Ve'im lo asa'o ela mitavshil levad t'mutar. So it says, right, b'diavad, if you only use the cooked dish, you're good. As we said, right? So as we said, right, lechatchila b'diavad, that's the way it goes. Very clear. Okay, so let's go to Gimel. So let's see if we need some Bet Yosef here, because this tour we already did. But we have to catch up maybe with the Bet Yosef. So let's see what we got there. Okay, so it says here the Bet Yosef. Katava Mordechai, right? It brings the Mordechai. Sham, the Itab Yerushalmi, it brings Yerushalmi, right? Eruvet Tabshilin Kachem, Pat Kebetza, right? Oh, so interesting, right? Then Yerushalmi, it says, right, the bread should have an egg size. We said yesterday, right, that an olive size is enough, right? But Yerushalmi says egg size, which is like double or triple that size. The had the kamar pat kebetza, and that which is said, right? That, and he says, but the tavshil kazait, but the cooked dish can be kazait. That's the way it says over there. Yerushalmi. The had the kamar pat kebetza with tavshil kazait palig Talmud adidan. So he says right away that this argues with our Talmud, right? Which doesn't say like that. So what does that mean? As we said yesterday, the Talmud only requires kazait for both the bread and also the cooked dish as well. So you don't need an egg size for either one. Okay, that's good. The mashma shiur kazait velo mipnaflik ben pat tavshil adkan. So he says, right, that since it doesn't differentiate between the bread and the cooked dish regarding the size, so you see from there that our Talmud, in other words, the Bavli, paskins that kazait is enough for both. Okay, that's one piece of bit Yosef. There's another piece here somewhere. Let's see if we can find it. This is it. Okay. Let's do this one. So it says in Bet Yosef, ומה שכתב רבנו שזהו שיעור בתחילתו בין בסופו בין לאחד בין אלף. So it says the tour that this size applies whether it's the beginning or the end, or whether it's for one person or 1,000 people. Right, so let's see what that means, right? So it says Bet Yosef, Gam ze beperek bet Betzah. It says this also says in the second perek of Betzah, right? Amar Rabbi Abba, Amar Rabbi Rav, right? These rabbis said, Eruvet tavshilin tzrichin kazait, right? You need a kazait for eruv. Ben echad ben bena. Doesn't matter whether you're doing it for one person or you're doing it for 100 people. It doesn't matter. It's all the same. So what does that mean, 100 people? It means you have 100 people in your house, right? You got like let's say you're running a dorm over there, right? You got 100 people there, right? In your dorm, whatever, God knows, whatever. So something like that, right? Or you have a very big, large, extended family. It's whatever, right? Whatever it is. Okay. Good. Ben le'echad ben le'mia. Tanan achlo o she'avad lo, right? Lo yivashel alav betchila. So now, right, we're going to the other issue, which is that, let's say, he made the eruv, but what happened was that somebody ate it, or it got destroyed, the eruv, right? So what does that mean? It got destroyed or eaten before, we got a chance to do all our cooking, right? Whatever that we needed to do. So what do we do there? Right? How does that work? So it says, so he says, you shouldn't cook like that. Because your eruv is like gone, basically, right? Gone with the wind, it's gone. לא יבשל עליו בתחילה, שיער ממנו כלשהו סומך עליו לשבת. But he says, right, if you left a little bit over, you can rely on that, he says. Right? So if there's something left over there, you're okay. But, just to point that out, that what's the proper thing to do, by the way? The custom, is to eat the eruv, like on Shabbat. But you shouldn't eat it before, because you're still using the eruv, so don't eat it on Yom Tov, because that defeats the purpose. So lechatchila, you shouldn't eat it on Yom Tov, right? Wait till Shabbat, then you can have it. If you want to eat it, you can have it.
But you do have to eat it on Shabbat, though, right?
You don't have to. No, it's just it's a custom. In other words, we don't want to let it go to waste. That's the idea, right? But if you want to save it for some rainy day, you can do that too. No problem. Okay. We seem to have a lot of rainy days these days, so we got lots of rain. Okay, so that's the story, right? Yeah. So it's okay. Okay, good. But don't eat it on Yom Tov, right? Otherwise, you're left with nothing. That's why, what I do is, when I make the eruv, I hide it, somewhere so nobody can eat it, like no wise guy can come, and nibble on it, right? Whatever. I usually put it like somewhere high, so nobody sees it, right? Out of sight, out of mind, as they say, right? That's it, right? This way, nobody touches it, including myself, by the way. Sometimes I could eat it myself by mistake, so that's why I put it somewhere high. This way, I remember that I'm not allowed to have it. Okay. Good. So he goes on. So, right, he asked over here, right, my koshu, what does that mean? There's something left over, right? Lava afagav delika kazait. Isn't there, aren't we talking about you don't have a kazait, right? And still you can use it? So he answers the Gemara, lo, date be kazait. So it says, no, we're talking about you have a kazait. So according to this, right, you need a kazait in order to be able to cook. Less than that is not enough. I'm talking about the case where, got eaten by somebody, right? Whatever, as we said, right? Or got destroyed, whatever it is. Tashma, right? The Tchilato v'sofo en lo shiur. So, right, brings another source over here, right? So it says that there's no size when it comes to beginning and end. My love en lo shiur. What does that mean? There's no size. Klal lo en lo shiur lemala. So no, Gemara says no. It doesn't mean that there's no minimum size. It means there's no maximum. When it comes to minimum, we have a minimum, right? What is the minimum? Kazait. So don't use less than that. Right? So Rashi also says like that, right? That if you don't have a kazait left over, you got a problem. You can't use it. Okay, very good. So let's go on. Then he says, right. So he brings the two, right, this thing that some say it means that they, when we talk about using lentils, which are like on the bottom of the pot. If you remember, we mentioned that yesterday. Some say this means that it has to be like fresh, like made before Yom Tov, the day before, not too old, right? By the way, what do I care how old it is? What difference does it make? 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, who cares? Anybody have an answer for that? So the answer is like this, you have to understand the theory here to understand the answer. The theory is that the reason why the Eruv allows you to cook for Shabbat is because it's like we started already, the day before. So now we're just finishing, right? But that doesn't really work when you have food, from like 3 days ago. You know what I mean? That theory doesn't work. It falls apart. You get my point? Because that was not the start of your cooking for Yom Tov. But when you're cooking the day before Yom Tov, that's the start. That's how you started. Okay, good. So we did that with Yosef. Let's go to Shulchan Aruch, Gimel. It says Shulchan Aruch, Shiur Tavshil Zeh Kazait, right? As we said, the size is Kazait, the minimum size. Ben Le'echad, Ben Le'alfim. Doesn't matter whether it's one guy or 1,000 guys, whatever, right? Ben Betchilato, Ben Besofo. And whether it's the beginning or the end, right? What does that mean, the end? That means if it was eaten or consumed, so you have to have at least a Kazait left over. Otherwise, it's not going to help you. Okay, so says the Rama here, v'yesh matzichim lechatchila bepat kebetza. Right. Oh, so he brings the other opinion, right, which we saw in the Beit Yosef, which was from the Yerushalmi, right? That what? That that you should have a egg size, right, when it comes to the bread. So it says v'chen nohagim lechatchila. So he says, right, custom is lechatchila to use egg size, right? So the Ashkenazim looks like they were a little bit stringent about that. Lechatchila, anyway, right? Okay, very good. That's the story there. So let's go on to Dalet. So here, right, we're talking about the tour yesterday that we read, which says that it has to be something which is a relish for the bread, right? As opposed to what, right? As opposed to porridge, right? Things like this, all these kinds of dishes like that. Cream of wheat, right? I don't know, God knows, all that stuff, right? So what's the reason why? Because people don't eat that stuff with bread, right? It's like a substitute for bread. It's a bread substitute. So it doesn't come as a relish for the bread. That's what the Tur says. So, right, says Bet Yosef, he brings the Gemara, the source, right? Sham Gemara, it says the Gemara there, Tet Zayin Amud Aleph, right, in Betzah. So over there, he says there's two different languages there, right? Texts. Pasku Poskim Kilishne Batra. So the Poskim, like the second text, second version. Shehu Amar Abaye, right, it was said by Abaye. Lo Shanu Elav Tavshil Aval Pat, Lo Mai. So they said, right, that's only regarding the cooked dish. But when it comes to bread, right, what about the bread? Tamad Demidi de Melafat Beinan Pat, Lo Melafat V'daisa Nami Lo Melafta. So it says, right, that as we said, porridge cannot be really, doesn't come as a relish for the right, for the bread. So it doesn't work out like that. Okay. Diamar Rabbi Zera ane babalay tipshe de'achle nahama ben nahama. Right. So right, there's this famous Gemara, over there. What does it say? Right. So apparently, right, these Iraqi Jews, right, who where they wrote the Talmud over there, right? So they had this strange custom over there, which was that that you would eat, bread with porridge. So so this rabbi comes, right, Rabbi Zera, and says, these Iraqi people, they're like idiots, Why idiots? Because they eat bread with bread, they're both bread, So why would you want to eat one with the other? What's the point? Okay. So Liftan Bainan the Mucha Milta Asui Shabbat. So he says, why do we require something which is a relish for the bread? Because that makes it apparent that you're doing it for Shabbat. Upat lo melafet, right? But you cannot, you cannot use hilkach lo mucha milta share bechol yom yesh lechem, right? So he says the bread itself is not like a relish, because you eat that every day. So it's not really apparent that you're doing it for Shabbat. וכבר נתבהר בסמוך דהה דאמינן אבל פת לא דעת רבנותם. So he says, we already explained, right, close by, that which we said, right, that bread you don't need according to Rabbeinu. היינו לצורך בישול, אבל כדי להפות בעינן פת, right? But Rabbeinu Tam holds that if you want to bake, so you do need bread, right? That's the thing, right? That's why you require both. The cooked dish is for cooking. The bread is for baking. Okay, that's the Beit Yosef. Good. Let's see Shulchan Aruch. So it says, right, the Shulchan Aruch, צריך שיהיה תבשיל זה דבר שהוא ראוי ללפת באותה pot. As we said, right, has to be something which can, be a relish for the bread, right? Something which accompanies the bread. Right? That comes to exclude porridge, right? Unless you're a Babylonian, Iraqi guy, right? Whatever. So, right, that's the way it is. So don't make your eruv with bread and porridge, right? Cream of wheat, whatever. That's not the way to do it. Okay, very good. So let's go to hey. So it says the Torah over here. מה שכתב, ומי הוא כל מיני תבשיל צלי שלוק ומבושל ראוי לכך. So it says the Torah, it doesn't really matter, how it's cooked, whether it's boiled, right, or roasted. It's all the same. So regarding that, says Bet Yosef, Braita, it's a Braita over there, Sham, Tet Zayin Amud Bet, in Beit Tzah. Rashi explains Shaluk. So, right, it's an interesting thing, in the Talmud, it uses two types of words, for boiling, right? For boiling something. One is called bishul, right? Bishul means to boil. And also there's another term which is called shaluk, right? So what's the difference between one and the other? They're not the same thing. They're not exactly like synonyms, And so what's the difference? So Rashi explains over here, right? When we say shaluk, that means it was boiled for a long time, right? We're talking about like heavy duty boiling, for a couple of hours, God knows, whatever it is, right? There are certain things, as you know, that right, that require lots of boiling, right? It's not enough to boil them for a half hour. You need like a couple of hours because they're very hard. It's an example, right? For instance, like the black-eyed peas, right, that we eat on Rosh Hashanah, right, which is coming up very soon, by the way. Only 2 months, less than 2 months. So time flies. So that requires half an hour of cooking is not going to be enough for that, right? The black-eyed peas. It requires like a good couple of hours. So that's called shaluk. Heavy duty boiling. Right? Okay. So either way, it's fine, right? Whether it's something which is cooked a little bit or cooked a lot, it's all the same. It's all good. Mevushal k'ilchato, right? V'da shebebraita ita. So it says you should know that it says in the Braita the kavush rawi lechach. Oh, what about now? He talks about the issue of like pickling, right? What about if something is pickled? Is that considered to be like it's cooked? So he says yes. So he says, right, Ketavu Arish Rambam Rosh. So all these three rabbis wrote this, right? The Rif, Rambam, the Rosh, that pickled is also good. So according to this, you could use a pickle for your eruv. Did you know that? Just reach into your fridge, take a pickle. So, so anyway, right, it says here, that, right, so what are we talking about, right? Kavush, so Rashi explains the chometz, right? That means it's pickled in, right, in vinegar, right? Or chardal, or mustard, right? Or minei yirakot, right? Or types of vegetables. Velo yadati lama ishmito rabenu. So I don't know why the two left it out, he says, right? ואפשר שטעמו מפני שהוא סובר, ובלא חומץ נמי כל שעת בדבר לך יום אחד מקרה כבוש. So it says it could be the reason is because, in halakha, right, in Talmud, whatever, we say that even something which was in a liquid, like water, for 24 hours is called pickled already. In a sense, it's a different kind of thing. So, therefore, right, you didn't want to include that. Because we're talking only about when it's pickled, in vinegar. Okay. כמו שכתב בספר יודע, קצת יודע, סימן פ"ז עמוד למתד, וכן עוד דגים מלוכים אין מערבים עליהן בלא בישול. Oh, so he says, what about fish, right, which is, right, pickled, salted fish, whatever, right? So what's an example of that? Like, herring, right? Things like this, right? בלא בישול, without cooking, כמו שאיבר בסמוך, we're going to say later on, ממילא האידחי אלא ברייתא קטן מערבים כבו בכבוש. So he says, right, that the Torah seems to hold that since we cannot use pickled fish, whatever, right, things like that, salted fish, so therefore it's not really halacha, this whole thing. דגים מלוכים כבוש מקרה. Why? Because it says salted fish is called, right, it's called pickled. ואפילו האחי אין מערבים בהם, but we cannot use them for עירוב. כל מקום, לעניין הדין סומכים על דברי הפוסקים שכתבו, right? But it says, nevertheless, we rely on the poskim that were lenient, right, about this. So, in other words, what he's telling you is that pickled stuff is okay. But we still have to, right, talk about the fish, right? It seems like it's not allowed. So we'll deal with that. But when he's saying that fish is not allowed, he's talking about salted fish, which is like similar to being pickled, So, okay, well, we'll have to sort that out. Work it out. Okay, so let's go on. It says in Braita furthermore, right, regarding this, אפילו קוליאס הספנין שדיחו בחמין מערב יום טוב, סומכים עליו משום עירובי תבשילים, right? So it says not only that, but you can also use, like, these types of fish, like, for instance, sardines, which can be like cooked in, like very just warm water is good enough to cook them. Like, it's not even boiling, right? Just a little bit hot, whatever, the water, warm, whatever. So there are certain types of fish that can be even prepared like that. You can use that, he says. Why? Because it's already considered to be cooked, because that's the way they cook it, By the way, how do they make sardines, with the stuff that we buy in a can? What do they do with it? They steam it, they use steam. So it's similar to what we're talking about here, steaming. That's the way you make sardines, you steam it. That's it, right? Then you're good. I think also that's the way they do the tuna fish, that we buy in the store. They steam it. So there are certain types of fish you can prepare by steaming, right? They cook very easily. Okay, we'll have to deal with that a little bit more, right? But he's telling you that here, that it's allowed, right? This kind of fish to use for the eruv. Rashi explains, Kulias explain, Dag maliachu denecha kemot shehu chai. So look what he says, right? He says that this fish is salted, right? And it's pretty much eaten raw, like sushi, right? Whatever, right? Shehu chai, ela shenotnin alav chamin, but he says they put some hot water on it, right? They pour some hot water on it. And that's the way they cook it, So similar to what we do, as we said, right, with sardines and tuna fish, right, things like this. והרמב"ם כתב ז"ל, אפילו דגים קטנים, so Rambam says even small fish, right, שדיחן במים, that the, right, I mean, they just, he poured some hot water over it, right, ודחתן הוא בשולן, so that's the way you cook it, it cooks very easily. So you don't need like really boiling water for that. Okay, good. כתב רמגיד, סדר רמגיד, שזהו פירוש מאי דתניא, so this is what it means, it's, we learn in Talmud, שאפילו כל יעשה הספנין שדיחן בחמין, like מערב יום טוב, סומכין עליו משום עירוב תבשילים. That's exactly what we said in Talmud, right? You can use this for an eruv, this kind of fish, right? So what does that mean? You could, right, break out some sardines, right, from your closet, and use it for the eruv, or tuna fish, right? That's good enough. Pretty easy.
You have to open the can, or can you just put a can out there?
Actually, you don't. There's, it's good to go. I mean, the fact that it's closed, doesn't make it any worse. So it's still edible as it is. So opening doesn't make it edible. You know what I mean? So it's fine. A lot of people don't know these tricks, if they knew, they'd get along a lot better. Okay, that's why we learned all these things, right? To know these things. Okay, good. So that's great. So he goes on here a bit, Yosef, right? Katav Rambam, it says Rambam, oh, so he says, right? What about smoked fish, right? Smoked food. That's also good, right? It's also good. Right? So it says it's written in Yerushalmi. So we have that too, So, so in other words, all that stuff is good, right? Smoked, steamed, right? All that stuff is fine. So that would mean you could use like lox, right? Which is smoked fish, basically. Or, the mackerel, right, that they use, smoked mackerel, all that stuff, right? Whitefish, smoked whitefish. It's all good. Okay, good. So let's go on. Krasina tu Yerushalmi, right? It says in Yerushalmi. Furthermore, I'm sorry, I skipped something here. Katar Magid, Shu Yerushalmi. I'm sorry, I said it. Krasina tu Yerushalmi. It says also in Yerushalmi. Beru Pirka, in this same parak, Kol Ochel Shehu Nechal Kemot Shehu Chai, and Bo Mishum Birshulei Goyim. So this is something that we've already learned in a different place, right? I hope you know this. If not, I'll teach you now. Right? So there's a rule like this, right, in Halacha that says you're not allowed to eat something which is cooked by a goy, right? So, right, but he says over here that if it can be eaten raw, this food, so then there's no prohibition. So what would be an example of that, right? Let's say, for instance, right, carrots, right? You can eat carrots raw. So if the goy cooked the carrots, you're allowed to eat it. Applies to also any other thing like that, Whether it's apples, right? Let's say that they cooked apples, you can eat it raw also. So if the goy cooked it, you're allowed to have it. All these kinds of things. So okay, and not only that, he says, but also you can use it as an eruv, right? These kinds of things. So meaning what? If you have some, let's say cooked, apple, right? And apples, not everybody cooks apples, but if you have one, you can use it for an eruv. Because after all, it's cooked, So you're good. Okay, almost finished, right? It's almost done there. So, right, כתבו הר"ן בסוף תענית ומרדכי משביו, right, וככה כתב אגרות מהמוניות בשם וסמ"ג. So all these rabbis wrote the same thing, right? They all agree with this. פרק ה' מלכות תעניות ויוצאים בתפוחים במושלים. That's exactly right what we said. You can use cooked apples, right? Mishum Eruv Tafshin for Eruv. The Muchach B'Yushalmi and the other name, like it says in Yushalmi. So you're good, right? With all these things, you're good. Okay, good. So let's see Shulchan Aruch and we're done. Hey, let me just make sure we did everything. No, it seems like there's one more piece over here in the Beit Yosef. One more piece. This one. Okay, let's see what this says, right? Dagim Ktanim Meluchim, right? Afal Pishin Meshulav Mishu, right? As we talked about the issue of this, right? These kinds of fish, right? Like sardines and stuff, right? They don't really cook them, they steam them as we sell, right? They pour some hot water over it. Gam Zepek Bedebitza, Amrav Aseh, Amrav Dagim, right? It's also on the second Perk of Bitzah that they say, right? Dagim Ktanim Meluchim En Ma'im Mishum B'Shulei Goyim, right? So there's two things, right? Number one, they tell you is that these kinds of fish, right? Sardines and like tuna fish, right? So let me ask you a question. We go right to the store, we buy in a can, right? These things. But wait a second. But it was cooked by a goy. How you buy this stuff? Right. So the answer is because they don't really cook it; they steam it, whatever, or so it's not really cooked. So therefore, you're allowed to have it, even if it was steamed by a goy, right, or smoked by a goy, right? Same thing.
But most of the cans have hectares on them.
I'm sorry?
They have hectares. The can that
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, you're right. So what are we talking? You're talking about what? Okay. I got your question. It took me a couple of seconds to understand you. I got it. I got the question. So you know what the answer is? That here's the thing, right? A lot of people don't realize this, by the way, that the OU, right, and other, hechshers, what do you think, right? They put like a hechsher on bumblebee tuna. Do you think what? They have a Jews cooking those things?
they have someone overseeing that.
I'm sorry?
You have to have like someone who oversees or starts.
No, they don't have nothing like that. When it comes to these kinds of fish, right? Sardines, they're made by goyim. So then, how do they put a hechsher on it? So the answer is because they know this halakha. That's how they put a hechsher on it. So the fact that there's a hechsher doesn't change what we're saying, right? Hechsher is for money. It's a business. They're making money for that. It's a good business. Jews need parnasa. I mean, we all need parnasa. Maybe I should go into that business. Hechsher business. What do you say, right? Should I do it? Make a killing on that, right? So the truth is, that OU and things, they put hechsher on things which are not cooked by Jews. You know why? Because they don't need to be cooked by Jews. They know the halakha, so that's why they do it. That's the answer. Because you see, right, that the OU will put like I'll give you an example, right? They're gonna put OU on like some kind of sardines which are made like in Spain, or in Morocco, So what do you think? There's Jews over there cooking that stuff? No, they give hechsher because they know it's kosher. That's why. Has nothing to do with that. You know what I mean? So the OU, is they know these things. I hope they know. Okay. I hope they're not right. They're knowledgeable somewhat. Whatever they are, they know. Okay, very good. The truth is, that all you is stringent about certain things. What you don't need to be stringent in halakha. Certain things, they're stringent. Whatever, But anyway, it's all good, whatever. But when it comes to this issue, they're not stringent because it's not possible. There's no way to. What do you think they're gonna send? Every place they make sardines in the world, they're gonna send some Jews out there, some Hasidic guys, to cook the sardines. No way. There's no such a thing like that. Okay, very good. So right, that's the story there. So let's see the Beit Yosef here. So he brings the source, right? The Gemara there. Where is this in Betzah? And also in the same place. Amar Rav Aseh, Amar Rav, right? These rabbis said, Dagim ktanim, menuchim, en b'hem mishum bishul goyim, right? As we said, right? These small fish, we don't care if they were made by goyim because, they don't cook them. They just steam them, whatever, right? Or they pour some hot water over it. That's not really a problem, you know? They smoke it, whatever, right? All these things are allowed. Amar Rav Yosef, Meim Tzela'an, Goy, right? Samech alehem mishum eruba tafshinim. So he says, right? Not only that, but if they were made by a goy, right? These things. In other words, let's say even he cooked them. The goy actually cooked that fish, right? So he says you're allowed to use it for an eruv. He didn't just steam it; he actually cooked it. Still allowed. Why is that? This is a very tricky question. I'll be shocked if one of you knows the answer to this one.
Does
So,
it do with the fact that he's cooking it on a day that it's not prohibited for him to cook?
no, that's not the issue. What it is like this, right? The point is like this. Since these fish can be eaten without cooking, right? As you said, you could just steam it or smoke it. So therefore, if the goy cooks it, it's allowed. Why? Because it's something which can be eaten without cooking. As we said regarding the apples, right? The same thing applies also here. That's a trick, So therefore, these types of fish, even if the goy actually cooked it, like let's say he baked it in the oven, it's still allowed. Interesting. And not only that, right? You can also use it for your eruv, right? So, right, break out your sardines, for the eruv, right? Just recently, my mother, she bought something which I don't often see, but it's there. It's in the store. They have it. I don't buy it personally, but she bought like, bumblebee, like, salmon, in a can. So, that's the same thing, right? They probably like smoke it or steam it, right? They don't, and it has OU probably, as we said, right? Okay, good. So let's go on. כתב ראש, איזה ראש? אפילו מלאכן גוי, הוצנן מלאכת גוי, right? לא אסרן. So it says, even if, right, the goy salted it, right? The fish, and then he also roasted it, right? As we said, it's fine. Why? Because the salting of the goy doesn't forbid it. So b'chaim, it says even though they're eaten, right, by way of salting, raw, right? The lo asa ela bishule goyim b'tzilat goy lo asartan kivan de nechalim b'chaim. So he says these things, as we said, they're not forbidden. Why? Because they can also be eaten, pretty much raw, right? In other words, meaning that you don't really have to actually cook it. You can steam it, you can smoke it, right? You can all that stuff, right? Okay, interesting. כתב רן, says the Ran, אם צלען גוי סומך עליהם משום דלא בתבשילין, שאף על פי שאין בו משום בישולי גויים, לאו משום דלא להווה תבשיל, אלא דהתם משום יקרו בדעתה, ובכל נאכל כמות שהוא חי, אין קרבת דעת. So the Ran gives a reason for this, right? So the question is like this, right? Why didn't the rabbis decree on these kinds of things? If the goy, did it, right? So he says, because this doesn't really, because the whole purpose, right, of having the goy, right, forbidding the goy from cooking your food is that we shouldn't, come close with them, that this causes intermarriage. You know what I mean? So therefore, right, so he says here, there's no concern for intermarriage. That's why the rabbis didn't decree these things. Why is that? Because these things can be eaten, like as is, so it's not really something which somebody will invite you, for these kinds of. And kiruv dat but since right, after all it's cooked, he says, right? After all, it is cooked, right? In other words, it's ready to eat. So therefore, he says we do make an eruv also with it, right? So we're lenient from both sides, right? we allow it, if it's made by a goy, number one, right? That's one side. And also we can use it for eruv. Okay, good, right? So right. So now he talks about, right, this thing what Bet Yosef mentioned, right? He comes back to this issue, right? Which is that, but they say like this, when it comes to salting fish, right? There we don't allow it for an eruv. Just the fact that you salted it doesn't mean you can use it as an eruv. Right, and it's actually very similar to pickling, right? With vinegar, but for some reason they didn't allow the salting. So where do we see that? Right, where's the source for that? So it says Bet Yosef. It's in the Gemara, right? Implied there, and also in the Rosh, right? So that's the source for it. Okay, very good. So yeah, we're done. So we're doing Shulchan Aruch and we're finished, right? Good. So right, let's go on. So it says like this, right? Shulchan Aruch. Tavshil zeh she'amu afilu tzali, right? So he says, right, this cooked dish that we're talking about for the eruv, it could be roasted, right? Afilu shaluk, or it could be boiled, as we said, right? Long time, short time, right? Afilu kavush, or it could be also pickled, right? As we said, right? So what is pickled? It means vinegar, right? Not salt. Or me'ushan, right? Or also could be smoked, as we said, right? All these things are good. Afilu min dagim ktanim, right? Also, as we said, even if it's like those small sardines, right? That they just, put some hot water over it, right? Or steam it, whatever. But the chatan hu bishulan, that's the way you cook it, that's the way it's cooked. So it's ready to eat, How does it somnech aleim? So you can rely on that. Also, as we said, right, you can use also cooked apples, right, for your eruv. So he brings in parentheses, right, also can apply to any other fruits, right? So that would mean you could take like your compote, right, with your fruits inside there, and you can make the eruv with your compote. How's that sound? Okay, so the dagim ktanim shebishlan. Also, you can use, as we said, right, small, fish, right, which is cooked even, right, by a goy. You could use it. Why is that? Because it can be eaten also without cooking. That's the reason why. Okay, great, fantastic. So, right, we're done with this. So I guess we'll stop here. Thanks for coming. Be blessed with wealth and health and happiness. B'ezrat Hashem. Laila Tov, Chazak Baruch. We'll see you tomorrow. And B'ezrat Hashem should give us good tidings and good news. Hashem should guard us, from all the enemies, right? Whether it's this side or that side, right? We have two sides, I'm not going to tell you which sides they are. You figure it out. Okay, so right, whatever. Anyway, so we'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for coming. Laila Tov.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you.
God bless.
Thank you so much.
All the best.